PlayStation Gaming went up against Dark Zero. Coming to this game, Dark Zero was looking like the best team in the entire world. Dark Zero had just won the Charlotte Major. Dark Zero had just won against Beast Coast 7-2. Space Station was not looking so hot on the other hand, and Space Station had just lost to Xset just 4-7 on Oregon, and didn't even qualify for the major that Dark Zero won all of. It seemed that this game was not going to be close at all, and well, it wasn't. Just not for DC. It was actually an absolute turn to form, and while on the surface level it could seem like a series of mistakes that just compounded to result in a loss by DZ, it was actually a spectacular game plan by SSG, as I saw on my third rewatch, as well as looking at previous tapes from Astralis and Sonics, Astralis in the finals of the major and Astralis in the previous stage, that proved to me that Space Station just had a fantastic game plan that they executed to perfection to get the win. Now, without further ado, let's get into the tape. To properly understand why SSG was able to make Dark Zero so uncomfortable and disrupt their play, we need to first understand Dark Zero's play. So, first up is how Dark Zero liked to attack armory lockers, and in general, more importantly to the overall rounds, as not every attack was armory lockers, how does Dark Zero like to get control of CCTV? And that's actually pretty simple in a way a lot of teams have shared with them. They just rotate a Buck and below. For Dark Zero, Buck is always NJR, and NJR always enters supply with the intention to Buck below anyone in CCTV, and they also always have Hyper, enter top east, who can then hold 90, although not 90 if you place the rotate on the right side, because there's no angle on that from top east. Either way though, he can stop anyone from coming in or out of CCTV from anything but this single wall if there's a rotate within it. And NJ can prevent anyone from playing within CC, so normally they can clean that up relatively easily. As soon as the Dark Zero roster can clear CCTV control, they can pretty easily focus on the people on site. NJ goes up the steel staircase, and everyone else basically just pushes the site directly through the breach. And while Grixer here does manage to get a really nice pick onto Eclipse, it is telling that he was forced to peek that, because under normal circumstances you wouldn't, but the site players are just so cornered by this strategy that they have to peek things that are insanely in Dark Zero's favor. And while he did win that because he's Grixer, on average these gunfights lean heavily towards Dark Zero, and Dark Zero eventually managed to cleanse out the round like they extremely often do. Now that we understand how Dark Zero sets up their attacks and their execute, we must understand how Space Station decides to defend against it. And the answer is a player playing inside of CCTV to prevent Dark Zero from getting their foothold, as well as a player playing in 90 with a rotate on the right side of the 90 wall, the two corner walls reinforced, and head walls on the left one to stop anyone from trying to walk in the break door, and the rotates to connect the two players, making it extremely difficult to push them from either the CC door, the CC window, or the break room door. And pushing them directly is 100% not the play, as Dark Zero surely knows already. The reason this is not the play is because those two players can swing any of those positions together extremely easily. So Dark Zero are left with the better option of just clearing them below. But for whatever reason, Dark Zero takes an incredible amount of time to take below control and kill them, because it's actually not that easy. Hot and Cold can play in a few positions here, and NJ has to take below and then drone Hot and Cold, and then Buck below him, and then re-drone him once he rotates, and then Buck below that position, and then finally kill them, which ends up taking about 1 minute and 15 seconds, leaving Dark Zero with only 45 seconds left in the round with CC control, and suddenly the round's not looking so great for him. And since SSG really did their homework, they actually know that Hyper always enters top east, leading to a free pick from Skaz with his shotgun, who is just waiting there for him right next to the rotate. This leaves NJ and Eclipse in a 4v2, which is very much not in their favor, especially against a team like SSG, who's known for waiting as soon as they get the man advantage, particularly on defense, and can just wait up the timer and wait for an insanely rushed execute from Dark Zero that you're just never going to win against Sky's Rampion Folds with 7 seconds remaining. And as always, SSD managed to ice out that kind of round. The next round in which Space Station holds armory lockers is round 4, in which they also use a shield on top of the CCTV table really doubling down on the CCTV setup that won them the round in the last round that they defended this in round 1. But Dark Zero is not really making any adjustments themselves. They're still pushing from break door, CCTV window, and CCTV door. And SSG is largely playing this the same, but they're going to make one key adjustment seen on how they deal with Buck bucking below. Last time Buck took a significant longer amount of time to clear this, but here Buck is bucking at a decent amount of time, so that SSG probably can't win this to time, but that's not their idea. They rotate Wamai out of 90, which is somewhat of a ballsy play considering that he's Hot and Cold's main cover in CC, but he does this in order to kill Buck, and while he doesn't directly kill Buck, he does misposition the Buck and make him not be able to look at the vert holes so Hot and Cold can get a free kill. This turns the round into a 5v4, which is not exactly ideal for Dark Zero and forces them to rotate not just Hyper East side, but Pambazoo as well, and forces them to push CC pretty much just from East. But pushing in East, even pushing into break from East, doesn't exactly give you a way to clear CC, and as you can see, Hot and Cold is still allowed to stick around with just a minute remaining inside of CCTV. The next round I want to show is round 3, where they show possibly my favorite wrinkle into the strat. Like really elevates it above really the default version we see a lot of the time. Fultz gets an OK onto Eclipse, but quickly gets traded by Rampy's death on NJ, but here is the wrinkle that I really enjoy and what I think makes this strat significantly stronger. Halton rotates from his position, he was playing in lockers, into CC. It seems incredibly small, but it's actually not. Because a large weakness of this strat is because it forces the CCTV player and the 90 player to constantly peek exterior angles, because if they don't, they're simply going to get walked in on. So they have to peek those a decent amount of the time, and occasionally they could get unlucky and they could get solo picked. So SSG has a plan for that, because SSG always has a plan, at least in this game. So as soon as they die to a lucky pick, Fultz does not have to fall back. Fultz can simply stay in his position, and Halton can play with them as the previous man. And while he does get a bit lucky that NJ neglected to drone it out, and on average that doesn't happen, overall it allows them to stay here and waste as much time as possible when they wouldn't have wasted enough time to win the round normally. And while they do troll a little here and get cut off because Dark Zero still have a really nice clear, it does end up to be really beneficial to the round. As seen here with Dark Zero's execute, where they're forced to go for this incredibly rushed execute, and Panba is forced to basically just walk into a shotgun, and Canadian is nowhere to be seen as SSG win yet another round to the clock. Once again, the clock is really winding down for Dark Zero, and with this 31 seconds left, they're forced into yet another rushed execute, which SSG again picks apart due to the lack of time, and this time they actually win to the timer. The second round is probably the round that best shows all the previous ideas of why this setup is so strong and why SSG kept winning rounds. Hot and Cold, or just really either of the CCTV players, once again gets an opening pick. Once again, Buck enters and attempts to play vert. Once again, as we saw previously last time with Wamai getting killed from vert holes, this time he's killed directly with mute. Hyper is once again killed, and once again, Dark Zero is forced into an incredibly messy execute because they have no time, and once again, just rush into Space Station's guns and basically lose to the timer, despite not technically hitting zero in this particular instance. Space Station did not exclusively do their homework on the previous extensions shown into the CCTV area. They also did their homework on how Dark Zero likes to attempt bathroom and attack it in a similar way by denying the foothold. Dark Zero always breaches jail as previously seen, and always pinches from outside passport as well as outside jail to kill the player trying to play in customs, gets the foothold in customs, and then rotates in and clears vert from the east side while having customs as a feet hold, and then normally goes for some kind of lobby push. And SSG's exploit of this is actually incredibly simple. They just have Hot and Cold rotate into supply after the wall is breached. Hot and Cold can then waste a significant amount of time, and while the floor is eventually breached above him at 115 as seen in that frame, him and Fultz had play there all the way up to this point, as we see here, he's basically just wasting as much time as possible in supply. Volts is directly behind him in customs, as you can see his outline on the right of his screen, and then they fall back at about a minute 25, letting SSG take control of customs at about a minute, but this means that Dark Zero is forced to execute all the way down at 30 seconds when Bosco still has 2 smokes, winning this to be a pretty defender favorite execute, which, while not impossible, especially for a team like Dark Zero, whose executes are fantastic even against the time, they still definitely have a hard time. And while SSG admittedly has a bit of trouble winning this round, it's not as easy for them as the previous rounds. Rampy manages to hit a nice shot, and as a result, Panbet is forced to plant, and luckily enough for my narrative, SSG wins the round once again, because Dark Zero ran out of time. And insanely unfortunately for Dark Zero, SSG didn't exactly run out of brain power when they switched sides. As seen here on their attack, and in my opinion by far their best attack out of the very few attacks that they managed to do because how good their defenses were, they managed to breach the archive single wall and then nade this trapped Canadian from the breach. They then have a Cali on the archive single window who could hold a long angle deep into sight, as well as stop these 2 players from rotating back into sight, as well as Zof on the office triple, who Zof then walks in office, cutting these 2 players off, making them have to push up into our LMG. Finka then pushes up as the plant goes down. Rampy gets a nasty shot onto NJ, and these 2 players are just waiting to be farmed by the 5 SSG players hunting for their position. Overall, just an insanely clean execute. Look at their high five to celebrate it, and just truly brilliant play from Space Station to cap off even more brilliance. And while your guess is as good as mine on whether Space Station can keep up this performance, if they keep playing like this, in the way we all know that they have proven they can, their only limit in the future is the stars. I'll see you all in the next one.